Thank you, sir, for coming to this podcast. This is actually my very first episode in English. But first, please introduce yourself and tell us what you do and what's your expertise.
Okay, thank you, Pak Jason. My name is Iwan Santosa, but is more familiarly known among my social circles as Iwan Ong. I'm working as journalist for the past more than 20 years. And aside from my assignment, I also doing many research on the Chinese history and military history. So in domestically and in the region. So I find the connection of the Indonesia's history with the global context with the different countries and major powers in the world, and the connection of the local Chinese population in Indonesia and in the regional Southeast Asia, how the integration, how the natural process was and is, and in the future.
Oh, talking about Indonesian Chinese, it goes a long way back in the history, right? So maybe it starts from the Han Dynasty.
Yes, what I know from one of my sources is she's a scholar in Chinese department at the University of Indonesia. She did her research in Chinese archive in Taipei, and based on her finding, the oldest recorded connection of the seafaring people between the island of Java and mainland China was in the year 133 AD, which is on the Han Dynasty, and that was a Japanese seafarer sailing from Java to China, not from the north to the south, but from the south to north. Oh. And Western record also recognize of the scale of the Japanese jung, the Japanese traditional ship, which the Western perceive is way bigger than the Columbus vessels.
But we also know there's another very famous Chinese person sailing from China to Indonesia, and that is Zheng He.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the story of Zheng He, maybe before he came to Indonesia, and then what did he do in Indonesia, and why is he such a big deal in Indonesia?
Well, the common narrative, especially among the biggest and most important population in Indonesia, is the Javanese people in the island of Java. The Admiral Zheng He is fondly called as a Dampo Awang or Sampo, Juragan Sampo. Juragan means is a great merchantman, is very rich and very extravagant and non-hegemonic, had a very good and cautious relation in many parts of Indonesia. He went to Java in the 1400 for several times, and as if we compare with the record in the tomb of his father, the Hajima, in Yunnan, there are inscription about several times about San Paulung, Semarang, which is now in the capital of the Central Java province, which has the biggest Zheng He temple. Sampokong. Sampokong is we call how we address Sampo Zheng He.
Yeah,
and it's mostly there's a different pronunciation because mostly we are influenced by the Fujian, the Hokkien vernacular. So he was perceived as a very noble man, and of course, initially the location of the temple was part of his the place where he observing his Muslim faith. So back then the Japanese still mostly were Hindu and observing traditional religion. So when Zheng He first came to Semarang, the local Javanese noticed that Zheng He and some of his crew did not eating from morning to sunset because they were in Ramadan.
Oh.
So they were fasting. So they were the local observing. Oh, later on in the after dark they start to eat. So that's among the earliest record and the collective memory of Zhenghe. So the location now became one of small Muslim praying hall within the temple compound, which is now the Sampokong Temple in Semarang. So it's like a joint communal sites. And during Zhenghe visit and voyage in Southeast Asia, he set up many of the trading posts, which is manned by the Chinese, which is mix of the Muslim Chinese and the non-Muslim Chinese. And it's scattered everywhere throughout in the modern Southeast Asia, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Philippines, and of course Indonesia. And one that the late President Abdurrahman Wahid often mentioned that one of his maternal ancestry was a Chinese Muslim, which is related to this Zhenghe period. So the Gus Dur Chinese maternal ancestry is related to Gan Engchu, the Chinese Muslim Kapitan. Kapitan is the Huaran, the Lingdao, the local Chinese leader of the Muslim Chinese community in Java back then, in Tuban. But before they live in Manila.
Oh.
So back then in Manila, before the Spanish colonization, on this Zhenghe period, there already the two local kingdom within the place we known as the city of Manila. So one of the kingdom is the Tondo, which is now port area of Manila, and in the south is the area we known as Intramuros, the capital, which is actually, that was a Muslim kingdom, which is related to Gus Dur ancestry, called the Kingdom Manila, and the king was Raja Sulaiman. So when the Spanish took over, they sacked the kingdom of Manila, they took over, so things happened. You know, and but to make story short, after the Emperor Yongle passed away, so there's no longer commission for Zhenghe to voyage, to travel to Africa, to everywhere. So all these former Chinese trading posts now being like neglected, no more connection with mainland China. So the local Chinese, especially the Muslim Chinese, they start to connect with the local. Okay. That's why one of the version of the preaching of Islam in Java, it's related to this the Wali Songo period after Zhenghe, because of this local Chinese, Muslim Chinese, then come to the interior. That's why, if you notice, several of the old mosques in Java is got strong Chinese architectural influence, like the Masjid of the Mak, or the minaret of the Masjid of Banten, which is now the symbol of the province of Banten. If you notice, the shape is a pagoda, and it was constructed by the Chinese Muslim architect. We call it, the local Bantenese known him as Encek Bancut. Encek is a salutation for the local born Chinese in Hokkien dialect. Encek is a susu, uncle, and then on so many. So they became integrated to the local community with a strong the interaction, like the one of the Muslim saint in Cirebon, the Sunan Gunung Jati. One of he married to a Chinese lady known as Nyai Ongtin. So in our Islamic Pesantren tradition, to the lady with respect we call Nyai. So this Nyai Ongtin, Ongtin is a Hokkien name. Ong is Wang Ongtin, and that's why nowadays the Sundanese ladies got the name Entin, adopted from this Ongtin.
Oh. And
the tomb venerated by the Muslim in Cirebon of the Sunan Gunung Jati is next to each other, of the Sunan, the respected Sunan, Venerable Sunan Gunung Jati, to Lady Ongtin, the tomb. The tomb of the Lady Ongtin also venerate by the local Chinese, pay respect, so on and so on. That's one of the forgotten history of the strong connection of the Chinese and the local tradition.
Oh, but how long did Zheng He stay in Indonesia?
He never stayed permanently, just make a visit. But we can see the influence of the Zheng He and the Chinese culture. We can see in our gastronomy and culinary. So we can see in our diet, if we see there's a kind of peanuts, we call the kacang-kacangan, is mostly Chinese influence.
So before Zheng He, Muslim was already had already been here in Indonesia.
There were theory that the Islam was brought by the Gujarati or the people from Gujarat, India to here. But there are also versions that there's also the introduction of Islam by this Chinese traditional Muslim Chinese community, which is for me, if you are familiar with the Hui people, many of the Hui tradition is similar with our traditional Muslim. Which is for me, it's open for discussion, because the idea is everything that's the Islam civilization brings something good for Indonesia, be it from the Gujarat or be it from China. But of course, the mosque in China we know is very ancient, like the New Che Mosque.
There's always a question for me about Muslim in Indonesia, because you have so many religions, right? 5 or 6 religions. Why or when did Muslim become the dominant religion in Indonesia?
The process is in the 1500, 1600 to 1700, the transition, the conversion. Usually the local leader convert to Islam and the subject follows suit, and it's mostly in a very peaceful manner. It's very a gradual process, but it took time. So it's from 1500 to 1700. Even so, in Majapahit kingdom, which was a Hindu and Brahmanistic kingdoms, they already they have the Muslim cemetery. There's a research on that. The Muslim cemetery in kingdom of Majapahit, in the capital in Trowulan, and the inscription in the tombstone was about the Hui. So they're the Hui, or they are the Hui people. So that was in the 1300 to 1400. They already established of the Chinese Muslim and the Muslim community in the capital of Majapahit in East Java in Trowulan.
So, what makes you so interested in the history of Chinese people, the history of Chinese influence in Indonesia?
Well, I came from mixed origin of the Chinese heritage, Indonesian heritage, and other heritage. And what I found, I was raised in the 70s and 80s. The situation was very unfavor of the good understanding and relationship between group. Globally we talk about the Cold War, but on the local context there's a discrimination against each other, which is institutionalized by the government, not, because of the context of the Cold War. So we never know people like, this is like soft version of South Africa. So this group being suspicious with other group and have a prejudice and, negative perception of other group, other ethnic group, other religious group. This is not the way a society should live with.
Yeah.
Given that we know that Indonesian civilization and Chinese civilization and all that thriving civilization is based on sincerity, courteous, and very pursuing harmony.
Yeah.
So that's it's a challenge to me to see how we fix this, how we fix the narrative to serve our own interests as a society, as a nation, as a big country, and also have a communication in Indonesia, ASEAN, and the region.
So the Chinese, the Indonesian Chinese also only makes about 2 or 3% of the total population in Indonesia. But there have been several persecutions or anti-China sentiments leading up to massacres or unfortunate incidents in the history of Indonesia. But the Chinese is such a small group, right, compared with the whole Indonesia. Why did it happen? Because when talking about Indonesia, most Chinese people will think about the first thing come to our mind is the massacre of Chinese back in the 1940s or in the Dutch
1740
and 1998. And what's the reason behind all this?
If we check the history, before the arrival of the Western people, we never had that. The segregation, the gunboat policy, the coercive in relation, it was imposed by the Western, not us on the inter-Asian relation. We never had that. If we check the history of China, India, Indonesia, nope, we didn't have that. So we're talking about 1740, it's all very political. So economic crisis lead to one another and lead to the, back then the economy relied very much on the Chinese sugar industry. So when the economy collapsed, they blame the Dutch, blame the Chinese, and eventually the Chinese allied themselves with the Japanese, fought the Dutch in the 4-year bitter war, which is now forgotten. During Sukarno's administration, these joint forces of the Chinese and the Japanese against the Dutch were still studied in the history book, but it's now long forgotten. And what happened? And we coming back in what happened in the 40s and in the 98. Well, we cannot distance these to the truth that the discrimination was institutionalized by the West. There's a research in the Cornell University about how the West, the America, and the British tried to contain China, tried to contain mainland China, tried to keep people in Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, to have a normal relation with China by create bad perspective against each other. And these are based on research, and the Cornell University already published it. The title is The Arc of Containment. And this is how they playbook they're still doing. So this is not by the local people in Indonesia or in Southeast Asia resent that naturally. No, this is something institutionalized. In the mid-1800s, the Dutch introduction the racial law segregated people. So the European became the first class, and the local elite became the first class. The Chinese, the Arabs, and the people like the Armenian, they consider like the Oosterlingen or the foreign Easterner on the middle as a buffer, and in the lowest is the ordinary Indonesian. And they become, and then goes all the exploitation, and it's became more blatant in South Africa. Similar, the Dutch and the Brits, they adopt the system, they keep the segregation. The same also what happened in Philippines, same in British Malaya, these classes based on race, based on religion. All the division is happened because in the past, the Asian marketplace, you can find Muslim, you can find Eastern Christian, you can find the Buddhist, you can Hindu. You don't have this problem. See, we check all the words, so we can check in the dictionary. The gunboat policy, so it's a Western word, not us, Asian.
Yes.
So this is not something natural that we have that kind of hatred and bitterness. This is something that we introduced and pushed became part of our notion.
But similar events also happened during the Japanese colonization and in 1998. I want to know about what really happened in 1998 that here in Jakarta, right?
Well, there were riot and also anti-Chinese riot. But back again, we cannot say, distance the situation of the geopolitics of the Cold War and how it's totally designed how people, to contain China, you must hate Chinese. You must hate the people. You must hate the culture. So and it's fabricate. And also when there's a situation come, as the momentum come, it's very easy to trigger. This is like what happened to Jews in the early 1900s and up to Second World War. It's all fabricate for to serve political purpose, to various group, and also the geopolitical context.
But in 1998, the anti-China riot was that a serious one, a big one?
Big, but this country is so big, so we cannot see what happened in Liaoning represent the whole event in China. What happened in Quito represent what happened in Beijing. Same, what happened in Jakarta is not represent what happened. If you travel to east part of Indonesia, if you travel to Papua, you travel to Molucca, you can see the local people with using local family name, or they're using local Chinese name, and they're working and live as local, not as a foreign Chinese.
Back in 1998, the president was Suharto.
Yes, President Suharto.
He said, what I read is that he initiated that anti-China riot.
Well,
that sentiment.
This is not for me. See, on the bigger picture, this is not about against Chinese or against certain group, but this is about divide and rules. The divide and rule concept, this is what introduced by the West.
Yeah.
And it is very easy to find the easiest scapegoat. So this is not just exclusive to the Chinese. If you come to the eastern part of Indonesia, where the preponderance of the community were Christians, so the prejudice is against another group, not Chinese. I'm not mentioning the group, but there are terms on it, But their hatred is directed to other group of Indonesian. So this is basically this divide and rule.
Is this true that the Dutch colonizers used the Chinese minorities to control local people, local economy, as to make them as what a scapegoat?
Yes, this is by design, because when the Western come, they know they cannot compete. They already see the market network established between the Arab, Indian, Chinese, with many group of Asian, from Arabia, subcontinent, Southeast Asia, to Eastern East Asia. So the only way they can rule is by arms, weapon, division, and create this layer of people.
Yeah.
This is the only way they can succeed. The way they still try to do in the current situation.
Why don't local Indonesian people hate the Dutch colonizers and the Japanese colonizers? Because I think most Indonesians see the Japanese as a free, liberalize or help Indonesia gain independence.
This is back again the issue of the communication. In that 60 until 2000s, all the information flow about China or Chinese is very negative, and is by design outside and domestically. So it's all the narrative is very bad. While Japan, when they start to return, we have the new government of Suharto, the undang-undang, the new bill number 1 on the foreign investment. They know the first thing first, what they do is communication. That's why we have the soft approach. Bring all the Japanese movie, Japanese culture, which is actually, excuse me, in the 80s, the Canto, the Hong Kong pop culture is very popular in Indonesia. But back then, we haven't normalized the relation, so the Chinese government also did not do it. Use it as a tool for the people contact. While the Dutch, the Western world, they know, aside from bring weapon, one of the strongest weapon is communication. That's why the American know half of the operation, military operation or the business operation, solved through communication, through media, social media, through communication, grassroots engagement. So they save themselves from the future problem by communication. This is something that's the Chinese nation is not stepped into yet.
Yeah.
But I believe someday they will do, because they everything the Chinese nation achieved today, they're not have it from other nation mercy, all the research they do it themselves, and this is something good for the relation.
The story I heard is that the Japanese, when they were still in back when it's still World War II, and they were losing the war, and they know they were losing the war, but they were still in Indonesia, and they told the Indonesian people that, oh, we will help you gain independence. But in fact, they had to leave Indonesia because they were losing the war.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a story.
yeah, but some of the Japanese soldiers, about 900 something odd, they choose to stay in Indonesia and fought for Indonesia.
Oh,
Yeah, and this later on they became part of the networking of Indonesia and Japan in peacetime, which is for me the same goes with between the Indonesia and China, because there are also many Indonesian, not just from ethnic Chinese, who support China in the war against Japan in 30s and 45, but also there were also Chinese nationals who came to Indonesia to support our war of independence. So, because back then, those idealist young men thinking about how we Asian live together and pursuing work together and, support each other. So, to me, it's just the issue of how the narrative never came to the surface, and this is a good start.
but during the Japanese colonization, what did the Japanese do in Indonesia? Because when they invaded China, we had they did something like the Nanjing massacre, 300 million people.
Yeah.
We just it's just a anniversary a few days ago in China. It's called 国家公祭日. It's a day dedicated to pay tribute to the victims of the Nanjing massacre. But did the Japanese do something like that in Indonesia? Or what did they do in Indonesia?
Well, the atrocities, it's also committed by the Japanese soldiers in Southeast Asia, of course, like in Singapore, in Chingsuk, in West Kalimantan, we have the Mandor massacre, and so many. But the common narrative, the thing is, like people in Indonesia and Southeast Asia, they forgot it easily. The memory is hard, and also the Japan side also very smart to bring the pop culture and everything. So people just kind of forget, and one for me, how to reconcile. First, we must acknowledge, forgive, and the victim give a forgiveness.
Yeah.
But if there's no formal acknowledgement about the mistake, how can we step forward for the reconciliation?
Is there a paragraph or a textbook dedicated to teaching Indonesians about the massacres committed by the atrocities committed by the Japanese in Indonesia?
There are part of the stories of the atrocities committed by the Japanese IJA, Imperial Japanese Army, but most of the narrative is very popular, something fun, peace-loving Japanese, which is good. But I think we must close the old chapter before to start a new chapter.
Yeah, the Japanese are really smart in this way. But the one thing about the anti-China sentiment, will that happen again in the future, do you think? Most Indonesian Chinese I met have told me that they were ready to leave anytime when something like that happened again.
Well, it could happen everywhere in the world, not just toward Chinese, but to the ecosystem where you allow negativity influence the narrative and the notion of the people. So it's our common duty as Indonesian to know the truth and to promoting better understanding. So to me, I live in a neighborhood where is a mostly 95% non-Chinese, and they were very good. The key is communication
Yeah.
and to build the understanding and to, we're moving forward. This is the problem. So some I tell my friends, please have a good communication with your neighborhood, with local leaders, because our social fabric is a very good, a very traditional community. Once we are very strongly rooted with the local community, it's all safe for everyone. So it's my welfare is my neighbor welfare.
I often read on the news that the Indonesian people, some Indonesian people will say that the Chinese are coming to steal our jobs. They are dominating our industries. We have so many rich people who have Chinese background. Is that a common narrative in Indonesia, or just some people try to twist the stories?
I admit, yes, it's a part of the common narrative because being disseminated, and it's for the factor of the geopolitics
Yeah.
became a pushing power. And, what we need actually is more also from the whole part of the community, including the foreign Chinese businessman, to introduce, to explain the information. I tell my Indonesian friend how the Chinese now became so rich because they first also accept the presence, the coming of the Taiwanese engineers and the Japanese engineers in the late 80s and 90s. And now they have their own engineers. And now, okay, we see the Chinese worker here, but, the Chinese not going to dismantle their factory and bring it back to China. Someday it's us. So is this the problem of the communication? That's why I just previously said the American half of the operation is solved in the communication.
Yeah, communication is really important, but in that sense, what we do is not enough to communicate between the Chinese people and the Indonesian people, because we still have so many people who don't know about each other's country.
Yeah.
Many Chinese people come to Indonesia, come to Bali. They go to Bali, but they don't really know Bali belongs to Indonesia. And many Indonesians only know the city names like Beijing and Shanghai, but they don't really know the beautiful sceneries in China. I think that's one thing.
Well, to me, this is why it's very important. First, communication and the people contact. And I know that's why we see this the first semester of this year, how President Xi met with all the informal leaders from the US and Europe, because he knows they are actually the leaders. They are actually the people who give the influence of the society, aside from the formal political leaders. He met with President Biden, but he met with all the business people. Even he welcomed Henry Kissinger.
Yeah.
With this, what we do now, the people contact, this podcasting, it's helped to bring better understanding.
Talking about the relations between China and Indonesia, one man is very significant. That is President Jokowi. He has been to China, I think, 12 times during his presidency. How do you evaluate the thing President Jokowi did to promote China-Indonesia relationship?
It was a very bold step because when he was first sworn in as president, the first trip he made was to Beijing.
Yeah.
And to me, this is game changer moment. From 1967 until Jokowi's presidency, mostly we all just selling raw material. When we start to have the streaming of the nickel, even though this is a very basic of the industrial process, but the Chinese willing to set up their smelter in Indonesia. And you know what? This is increased our revenue to 30, 40 times, which is good for Indonesia, and it's good for the world, because the same goes with in Latin America, in Bolivia, in Africa. You know, smelting is part of the first phase of the industrial process, which is Chinese willing to share. While this called the civilized Western world, they all these years they just importing raw material. They don't bother to have this small part of the technology shared to developed world, which is in many forum they will always encourage, you must be wealthy, must be strong, you must develop. This is part of the development at the beginning, the early step. Why didn't you start? So when we start to have this with the Chinese, and now the Western country also is thinking agree to have, and I think this is a good incentive for the world and the global South.
The technology thing and the sharing technology with Indonesia. One of the examples is the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway. Because since the start, maybe inside the government, most people want to build a high-speed railway with the Japanese, but I think Jokowi decided that we are going to do it with China. Now it has borne fruitful results. It's a good start. But you haven't tried the high-speed railway?
Not in Indonesia, but in China, several times.
When was the first time you?
It was 2012 or 13. Was either in Guangzhou or in Hebei.
But before that, you ever tried the high-speed railway, like in Japan?
In Europe.
In Europe,
that's a medium, not the France TGV. It's a medium speed between Holland and France. I traveled a couple of times of my work to Paris and Amsterdam.
But in China, what do you think? What do you think of it?
Good. It's to me, if this can bring good for humanity, it's good.
The Indonesia now has the fast train, high-speed train. The only one in Southeast Asia, and Indonesia becomes the second nation in the world that owns a train that can run at 350 kilometers per hour. Is this a big legacy of Jokowi?
People, yes, and I think we must continue, because what I know, one of the agreement why finally we opt to cooperate with China, because the agreement is in Southeast Asia, if there's a future high-speed train project of China with ASEAN countries, Indonesia will take part, which is good. This is the concept of the Chinese idioms is 接济生蛋. The Chinese borrowing their hen and producing the egg, and the egg we sell the egg and share the profit. So the economy or the concept of sharing, of the harmony, stability, and continuation is something is not almost non-existent in a monopolistic zero-sum game of the Western culture. So this is, I think, it's very good.
I think Tesla has decided to build factories in Thailand and not in Indonesia, but many Chinese car makers are coming to Indonesia to help Indonesia advance the development of green economy. I think that's a very good thing, because China know how to do things, but maybe we don't really know how to tell our stories right.
I think that's good, and given Thai also in a good communication with us, and Indonesia also in ASEAN is a key factor of stability. So it's good, because the ASEAN market is also integrated.
But to be honest, Indonesia is a big player, should be a big player in its right. But in China, Indonesia is not as popular or well known like Thailand, Vietnam, even the Philippines. Why do you think so? What makes this
Well, the
happen?
problem is communication, communication from both sides because, like during the Cold War days, most of our information about China is from the West, and vice versa. The Chinese information about Indonesia also from the West, not from our own direct contact. So I think this is a good incentive to start to have a stronger direct communication, to understand each other. I used to work with many Japanese engineers in the 90s. I'm quite familiar how the Japanese work. So it is, and for me, it's a good start for me to learn also how to work with the Chinese counterpart.
I read your book about Chinese history in Indonesia, and you said there is a strong connection between Chinese culture and Balinese culture.
Mhm.
Can you tell me about it?
Well, what I know, one of the narrative is in the 1100. That's during the Sung dynasty. There's a local Bali king married to a Chinese lady.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and ever since to
Was this lady
called
from China?
not sure, but she lived with the assistant of the king is a Chinese.
Oh,
So the king name is King Raja Jaya Pangus. So the lady name, her family name is Kang. So the Balinese call her Dalam Bali Kang, Kang Jinwe.
yeah.
So then the Balinese make a performance showing a big like big statue representing the King Jayapangus and the Chinese lady with their distinct features, the brown face of the king and the yellowish complexion of the lady, very Chinese and very Balinese, and they bring this couple in the dance for the bring good luck until now. And also ever since the Balinese adopted the Chinese coin, it's from the Tang dynasty.
Oh,
Yeah, it's still in the 80s in the village. People still use it for currency, and also in daily ritual in Bali, people praying to this Chinese lady for to bring good luck for Balinese business people, and they form a statue from the Chinese coin into a goddess shape and pray for that to this Chinese lady.
oh. Well, I see that the Japanese culture and the Korean culture are really popular in Indonesia. Maybe it's the same thing in Southeast Asia. Uh, so, what should the Chinese culture do and to promote itself, or what Chinese culture is popular in Indonesia now?
Well, actually, many of the Chinese influence culture of the past 1,000 years is already became like an inherent
Oh,
part of the cultures in Southeast Asia. What we need more is, reinvigorate the memory and try to embrace again once again each other, and knowing the pop cultures each other, like the game, the online game or the Chinese online game between the young people is very popular in
yeah,
a game forum, but they cannot communicate because the other sides only speak Chinese, and here we speak Bahasa or a little bit of English.
yeah.
So actually, there's a big opportunity to have a strong engagement, especially Chinese best at is a business. So we know many big Chinese enterprises, but we never know the success story. So let's start the Chinese side share the success story. Huawei, Oppo, Xiaomi, even the last year was very popular is the Mi Shui.
Yeah,
It became a very fun. People see it as this is funny,
yeah.
but nobody in the Ministry of Information in China think this is the opportunity. This is a good entry point to have a
But
cultural contact.
I think the thing about it is that most Chinese companies or some Chinese companies, they don't want to overstress its image as a Chinese company because they are afraid of the anti-China sentiment. If the Chinese company is dominating or is leading leading over Western companies in a certain industry. Some Indonesian people might say that, oh, the Chinese are here, they are dominating everything, they are taking everything over, they are trying to influencing our politics, our economies, they are taking control of our lives. Maybe some companies are afraid of that kind of narrative.
Well, to me, it's we must bring back again on how we perceive things, because what I know from the Chinese point of view, pressure or the challenge is opportunity. So if there's a thinking, oh, we are afraid that we will be thinking like dominating Indonesia. No, like this big company, they have also a big chance to work with an ordinary Indonesian, like the cell phones company, this, those famous brands like Huawei, Xiaomi, Oppo, ZTE. One of their communal, I know they pay a lot for the Indonesian social support funding. They can helping Indonesians doing a cell phone service company business, small business, this is a win-win to everyone, and this is good to everyone.
But it's not good for the Western countries. The Western media or the Western countries will say that the Chinese are taking over Indonesia, taking control over Indonesia, and some Indonesian people might believe that kind of thing, and then it will lead up to the anti-China sentiment.
No, to me, if the Western frame that Chinese taking everything, isn't the West the one who said is a laissez-faire, a free market? So it's open. It's also open for them. Is would they want to cooperate too? Like what happened in Guyana, the Chinese oil company with the Exxon Mobil of the U.S. they cooperate. Like in New Cairo, in an Islamic country, the Chinese contractor work together with European contractor. So it's also open here. And to me, well, if this is for the good for the people, why don't we do it?
Yeah, but I think it will take time. I still read in the news that some people believe that a lot of Chinese people are coming through the airports to take over the jobs of Indonesians. But actually, most of the factories employ over 90% of its employees from the local Indonesians. But the narrative is really important. But right now, the Western media are controlling this kind of narrative.
For me, it's not about to have a counter narrative, but to have our own narrative. That's what we never do. And to me, one is this thing. For many times, if I bring my Indonesian friend or Indonesian officer to the Hui Canteen, they were very surprised. And they were showing very strong respect of the Chinese have the Muslim culture too. And this is something very easy to bring to the people,
Yeah. Do you think more Indonesian people should go to China to see for themselves?
Yes, but if they either don't have the opportunity to go to China, bring that, part of the Hui Canteen or the halal restaurant to Indonesia became part of the popular cultures like the Japanese do or the Korean do. We have everything K-pop. Why don't we have the Qingchen in every cities where the Chinese companies is existed in Indonesia, which is and also given courses and training and supporting for Indonesian startup, the Qingchen.
Yeah, from your circle of friends, how do they perceive China right now?
Those who knows been in contact with China or ever been to China, mostly positive. But those who never been, when I first time came to China, that's changed my view. But before it's all negative because this is something what happened when you get a very negative campaign for years. This is what happened.
So, do you think the future presidents, just next year, the new president will continue the path of Jokowi to build a good relationship with China?
Well, for Indonesia is known to anchoring the principle of stability, neutrality, and that's what the other big countries respect. So for me, the big five of the UN, including China, is a countries that we should keep, because we share the same notion of the stability and peace.
Yeah.
So it's a very fit in between the Chinese point of view and the Indonesian point of view to have a international relation, which is for all these three candidates. They also they hold the view of that Indonesian neutrality, stability, and growth, which is, these are same values valued by the Chinese.
Yeah. I think on some issues, the Indonesia and China are doing the same thing, like the Israel and Palestine issue right now. What's the general sentiment here
Well,
among the Indonesians?
Yeah, of course, Indonesia supporting the freedom, the independent state of Palestine. It's unnegotiable, and it's already proposed in the 20s, 30s, when there were ideas, the formation of two states, the Jewish state and the Arab state, and we must face the reality, the grim reality, not just for the Muslim Palestinian during the Islamic rule of the Ottoman Empire. The Christian population of the Arab Palestinian Christian, about 10% of the population, but nowadays is just 1% under Israel. So we can see how dire is situation, and also what happened in Gaza nowadays. Okay, you want to terminate one of the Hamas, but with all the victims of the young children and the female Palestinians and Palestinian. This is manslaughter deliberately. Yeah.
Yeah, do you think it's possible that when the Israel actually annihilate or defeats Hamas, there could be another Hamas?
Well,
What's the way out
the
for
other
Israel? Because Israel has already started its aggression against the Gaza Strip attack. They swear to annihilate Hamas. How is this coming out right now?
they don't have the exit plan. I'm doing a military history research. So, in our war of independence against the Dutch, in many Dutch record, our freedom fighter were branded as Bende Terroristen Extremisten. Bende is a group of thugs. Terroristen is terrorists. And extremisten is an extremist. So Indonesian soldiers, Indonesian militias, by the Dutch point of view, considered as a terrorist, extremist, and thugs. So we are not freedom fighter. You see in the Western history too, many local Western nation, they fought against occupation.
Yeah.
So it's very natural, and it's already proposed. This a two-state solution. If we want peace, we pursuing this two-state solution.
What about the way out of the Ukraine-Russia conflict?
Well, of course, we also pray for peace. So if we must save the Ukrainian because they are a victim, we must also say the same thing applied for the Palestinian in the Gaza Strip. So they are also fellow human being like the Ukrainian.
I think during several votes, the United States and the UK have already opposed a peace deal or stop fighting right now, a ceasefire.
Well, to me, this is to see how the double standard is the Western world see the world, how their humanitarian standard for Ukraine and humanitarian standard for Palestine is different. But for me, as Indonesian, they are no less human than me. Be it Ukrainian or Palestinian, they are a fellow human being. We must protect every single life.
Yeah. But another thing is about your book. I like your book a lot. It's about the Chinese culture in Indonesia. For you, what's the most influential Chinese culture here in Indonesia?
Well, it's affecting in every aspect of life, as in culinary, in clothing, in housing. So it's basically from cradle to the grave, not because as a dominant culture, but is a very natural, harmonious interaction between the Chinese migrant, those who dwell here for many generations, and with a very open, warm, welcoming Indonesians, ethnic groups everywhere.
I think one of the example is the batik.
Yeah.
I heard that batik used to be in black and white.
Yeah, batik formerly is only wear by the royal family and have a certain pattern. So those who introduced, commercialized the batik were the Peranakan Chinese, or locally born between the Chinese male and the local female. They introduced the batik, especially in Java. It's known as batik pesisir, or the coastal batik, with a bright color. People fancy it, and it's became now a part of the local identities, like from the west part of Java to Madura. There were very, very many variety of, like one of the pattern of the cloud, Legiun, is being used now in a high-speed train.
Yeah.
It became of the iconic batik in Cirebon. We call the halimun. Halimun is the cloud. So it's a Chinese influence, openly accepted by local and adopted, and it's modified. So it's a very natural, harmonious process.
I think there is also batik in the Chinese province of Yunnan.
Yeah.
It's the same. What's the connection between Yunnan's batik and Indonesia's batik?
We see the Chinese batik in several provinces in the south. We notice a lot of similarity of the dark colors.
Yeah.
Rather dark and more conservative. So it's the similarities. But there's not much research paid on this area, including the wayang and the wayang orang. See, our wayang orang is our opera.
Yeah.
So actually, this is 1,000 years process of interaction between China, Indonesia, and Southeast Asia with China, which is long forgotten.
If I'm not mistaken, there's also a village in Guangdong, in the province of Guangdong. The village, most people there speak Bahasa. Have you ever heard about it?
Yeah, mostly they are the Huiguo, the people of with Chinese ancestry, which was in the 1960s, were offered to repatriate to China. So they now live in several villages in China, like in Fujian, Guangdong, including Hong Kong and Hainan. So they still retain their Indonesian heritage, the culinary, the arts. They speak the dialect, they speak the Sundanese, they speak Javanese, they speak Balinese. So and for us Indonesian, they're part of our diaspora. And this is like a very important asset for cultural asset between the two countries.
Indonesia has over 1,000 ethnic groups.
I'm not sure if 1,000, but definitely there are hundreds, and even in Papua, different villages you already speak different dialect.
But they all speak Bahasa Indonesia.
Yes, as a lingua franca, as a language of communication. Yes, we speak Bahasa. That's something very good for a country as big as Indonesia.
It amazes me, right? Such a big country, so many ethnic groups speak one language. It's how does Indonesia do it? The Bahasa language is developed by Dutch.
No, we already have this lingua franca from the Portuguese, then the Malay. We have this lingua franca, the Malay language, which is also absorb a lot of foreign words. So which is later on in the 28, we agree on the youth Congress to have a single language for a national language, which is from the Bahasa Melayu we adopt as Bahasa Indonesia. And that's a very big-hearted of the biggest group of the Javanese and many of the leaders of different group to agree upon to have this language as a lingua franca and national language. There's a great consensus.
It's like the Mandarin in China, but we have 56 ethnic groups. It's really interesting.
Yeah. That's the beauty of life, diversity. So this is also fit in with the Western ideas of diversity and the free market. So why when it's come between non-Western people, it could be perceived negatively? Because this is our own free dialogue, our own free market, our own diversity. So we're not patronizing them. Why they patronizing us?
Yeah. Maybe on the last topic, how did Jokowi become the president 10 years ago?
Well,
He was only
a
a
mayor,
mayor.
and
Before he was the mayor, he was only a businessman.
Yeah, businessman, a quite successful businessman. He ran for mayorship in Solo or twice, and he quite successful. And then ran for Jakarta governorship, and afterward they ran for a president candidacy, and which is, I think, was good for the country.
So he could be seen as a grassroots president.
So far, the president without elite background he was the first one to break the tradition.
So how does the presidential election work in Indonesia? How many rounds? How many candidates? And how do they compete with each other?
Well, on this February 14th, if there's one contender get more than 51 plus vote, it's already settled in the first round. If not, they're going to be a second round between the top one and the second. So, well, we'll still wait for the result.
Yeah, we talked about Russia, and you watched the video, right?
Я видел Нью-Йорк Таймс. Дайте, пожалуйста.
Нет, давайте мы сначала дадим Синьхуа, а потом Нью-Йорк Таймс.
Да. Добрый день, Владимир Владимирович. Здравствуйте, очень рад вам задавать вопрос.
Putin said Xinhua first and then New York Times. What do you think of that episode?
Well, it's normal. We must face the reality. The world is a world of equal, world for everyone, world of multilateralism. This is not the world of the zero-sum game, the West against the rest of the world. It's the world for every country, every nation, every civilization. We are complementing to each other. So I think it's normal. It's not okay. The Cold War is over when the Berlin Wall collapsed. Why should we see that kind of mentality prevail today? Which is, to me, it's a fair place for everyone. Not just it's America or non-America. Well, in Bandung 1955, all the leaders already agree. A just world, a new world for everyone.
That's a huge deal in Indonesia's history.
Yeah.
It's also very popular story in China about Premier Zhou Enlai went to Bandung. There was another episode about that incident because there was a
plane bombing.
Yeah, plane bombing.
The Princess of Kashmir, the Air India, which supposed to be boarded by Premier Zhou, and it was blamed to the Western intelligence. Yes, that's.
Yeah. I have went to the Museum of Asia-Africa meeting several times, but a lot of times it was closed, so I had to bribe the guards to get in. There were a lot of pictures there. The museum is a must-go place for Chinese. Yeah. A lot of Chinese, because they all know about the meeting, so they all want to go there. But unfortunately, there was no Chinese translator or interpreter or guide or tour guide in that museum.
One of a very positive coverage on the Chinese delegates on Bandung is the presence of the Muslim Chinese member of the delegate.
Oh,
Yeah, one of the leading writer, senior journalist was the late Mr. Mahbub Junaidi from NU. He was working for a NU newspaper, and he wrote a very beautiful story about this Chinese Muslim lady and the Chinese delegates and how, their activity is very sympathetic article.
yeah. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Most
Thank you.
welcome, Pak Jason.
Thank you.